This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, and around the world on the X-Zone Broadcast Network and Starcom Radio Network. Toll-free worldwide, 800-610-7035. My email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV. And our main website, where you can listen to the X-Zone 24/7, 365, www.xzoneradiotv.com. Now, if you'd like to go back in time, all the way back to 2002, that's right, we have all our interviews available to anyone, free of charge, at www.xzonearchives.com. Don't forget X-Zone Nation, Wednesday, September 30th from 8 p.m. until 10 p.m. Stanton T. Friedman will be debating with Michael Horn, the North American representative of the Billy Meyer UFO group, about the legitimacy of the Billy Meyer case. That is Wednesday, September the 30th from 8 p.m. until 10 p.m. Eastern, right here on the X-Zone Radio Show. My guest this hour is Brad, and Brad, I hope I don't mispronounce your name. Kochunas?
Kochunas. You just sneeze it out.
Kochunas. All right.
Yes.
He is an astrology consultant, award-winning writer, speaker, educator, and mental health professional. He spent 3 decades behind the scenes using astrology in prison mental health. He is a popular presenter at conferences and the author of The Astrological Imagination, where Psyche and Cosmos Meet. And his website is www.astrocares.net. And Brad, thank you very much for coming on the show. Great pleasure talking to you.
Well, thank you.
Brad, tell us about using astrology with prison mental health. How did that work?
Oh, well, I guess the first thing I would say about it is that I taught a basic introduction to astrology class there for about 20 years to inmates. Mm-hmm. And it was intended, actually it was not called that, of course. We called it Enhancing Self-Awareness Through Myth and Symbol. So the attempt was made to teach these guys about the language of astrology, so that they could apply it in their own personal birth charts. They could understand what you could derive from the birth charts, mm-hmm. and consequently, hopefully, get a little bit better insight into their own personalities and their own motivations about things in their life. In addition to that, then, I also had counseling clients, and although the astrology their charts were on my computer, mm-hmm. I did not necessarily bring it into the sessions. I had it there for me to look at the chart to kind of guide me in my questioning to the clients. Occasionally, a few clients knew that I was into astrology, if you will, mm-hmm. and they had an interest in it, so we would bring astrology into the chart or into the session and talk about it a little bit in terms of their chart, their life, and their situation. But generally, for most of my clients, I had their birth data, I had their charts on my screen, and as I said, I could use it as a kind of guiding device to help me pursue a particular line of questioning in terms of what I saw on the chart, in terms of whether or not they had aggressive issues with something to do with Mars being challenged in their chart, or relational issues with Venus being emphasized, or lunar issues regarding their ability to care for others and to and receive care from others. So that's basically how I used it over the years.
What was the final result when you were using astrology with the prison mental health people? Did it help them?
That's whether I used astrology or not. That's always a hard question because once they're out of prison, then you never know what happens to them. Except about a third of them will return to prison in the next 4 years, generally speaking. But the ones that I enjoyed working with the most were the guys who were never going to get out of prison. And so they had to find a way to construct a meaningful life for themselves, knowing that those 4 walls would pretty much be the entirety of their lives. So I was privileged to be able to go on that journey with them, that journey to find some kind of meaningful life, when you know that this is not what I had planned for my life when I was younger, and now I'm here. Generally, those people were more serious offenders, of course, and would either be in prison anywhere from 25 years to life. And so I can only say from verbal feedback from clients and from astrology students in prison that they found it helpful. But if you would be asking for hard data, of course, I don't have any of that to provide.
What was it that got you first involved or interested in astrology?
Actually, it was one of those advertisements in the Sunday comics back when I was 19, when I was 1969, and you could get a free astrology printout from a computer place at that time for, I don't know, $5 or free or something like that. And when I received that in the mail on a dot matrix printer, so you can tell that's reaching back a bit. It was quite enlightening for me. I go, wow! I mean, all they had was my birth data, and they're saying things with which I agree about how I am as a person. And I thought, maybe there's something to this. And then I got involved with a particular textbook that I liked, and then we had, oddly enough, that was in the late 60s, early 70s, and you would have cultural events. And one of those cultural events, we had a speaker who was an astrologer, and he came to the college, and we listened to him, and I thought, well, maybe there is something to this. And then I found an astrologer that was in Cleveland, Ohio, who was coming down to provide classes for anybody who wanted to take him in that town where I went to college, and so I did that, and then continued from there. I ended up taking a lot of independent studies in college, undergraduate, to study astrology, and was able to pull it off once again because of the time and the spirit of the times. And then in graduate school, I was studying the history of religions, and I did my master's thesis on religious dimensions in contemporary astrology. So it just continued, and eventually I got not only my master's in religion, but I went postmasters to get classes in counseling, and then after doing that, was able to get into a job where I did counseling. So I spent 30 years in prison. Fortunately, I was able to walk out every night.
Let me ask you, how do you differ from other astrologers?
Well, in the astrology world, I think most people have the idea that you go to an astrologer and they will tell you your future, or they will forecast trends in your life, and that whole notion of a predictive astrology. And I do not practice that at all. My astrology is all called psychological astrology, and the focus is on what's happening now with this person, and are there any insights to be gained from looking at their birth chart, their natal chart. And so it's still kind of a continuation. I'm retired from prison now, and I only see a few clients privately, civilians, of course. So I'm not out there in the marketplace promoting myself very much, but when I do see clients, they're coming to see me as more of a counselor who uses astrology as opposed to an astrologer who will tell them their future.
Gotcha. How does astrology work? Like, I remember as going to different bookstores and picking up books by Sidney Omar at the beginning of the new year and going through and seeing what my year was going to be like. How do you people figure out what is going to happen in a person's life based on the stars?
Well, I would pull back a little bit and say I don't know what's going to happen in a person's life, but the way that other astrologers do that, let's put it that way, is that you have a number of symbol sets in an astrology chart. You have, planets, of course, of the solar system, and those planets are in particular zodiac signs, and those zodiac signs are located within something called the houses in a chart, and those houses are all descriptive of particular life contexts like home, career, relationship, recreational activity, health, finances, education, areas that we would all experience in our lives. And when you see a certain kind of planetary activity going on in that person's chart, you kind of overlay what's going on in the sky, the pattern that's there now, and you kind of overlay that over their what's called the birth chart or the natal chart, which is a picture of how the sky was at the time they were born. And then you see what kind of interactions and dialogue are occurring between those planets that are in the present versus those planets that were part of that photograph of their birth. And consequently, you can make some statements about, well, there may be a challenging time in the person's relationship, or there may be opportunities for promotion in their career. Once again, that's not something that I engage in, but most astrologers, at least all the ones that I know, would not hesitate to move into those kind of predictive aspects.
Do you consider yourself to be part of the New Age community?
No, I'm fairly far away from that. Not just in general with the New Age community. I mean, I've looked at some of the guests that you've had, and although I'm fascinated by all that stuff, I really not much of a believer in most of the things that would be associated with New Ageism. And specifically in astrology, although I have many astrologer friends, I'm really not part of the crowd in the sense of seeing it in the same way. Because many of them have that kind of fundamental New Age orientation that humanity is evolving and getting better and moving towards spirit. And,
and we're all going to go down to the beach. We're going to light a bonfire, bring the marshmallows, melt them, sing, hold hands, and sing Kumbaya.
Well, I'd be willing to do all that.
Yeah, sure. So would I.
But I've never been one. In the States, we say, I'm from Missouri, which I'm not, of course. But you say that as a statement that means it's a show-me state. You have to. If I've experienced something, I'm more likely to believe it than if someone tells me about it.
Makes perfect sense. How or when or why did you decide to incorporate astrology with counseling, or was it counseling with astrology?
And I'm glad that you make that distinction. It could be one before the other. And it was incorporating counseling into astrology because I was involved in astrology prior to going to post-grad for counseling training.
Right.
But some of the authors in astrology that I had been reading, their whole basis, once again, during the late 60s, early 70s, was moving astrology toward being a counseling tool, one that might be useful in gaining insights around personal growth issues. And so it was kind of a natural fit to some degree. There's certainly problems with that, and there's certainly lots of forms of psychology and lots of forms of astrology. But specifically, that was the direction that I felt that I resonated most with, that I wanted to be helpful to other people, to be of service to other people. And circumstances were such that I had opportunities not only in the astrology world, but in the mental health world. And they kind of all came together in order to allow me to integrate those two. Admittedly, a bit unusual. In fact, most astrologers that I know who are also mental health professionals, at least in this country, are on the east coast of the U.S. or on the west coast of the U.S., and I'm pretty much down in the middle toward the Mississippi River, Ohio River.
What were the comments of the warden or the other prison officials when they learned that you were actually teaching astrology? Were they supportive of you?
My immediate colleagues in mental health, the various psychologists and social workers that were people that I worked with, once they heard my end of the story or read some things that I had published, they were at least willing not to challenge me on it, because they found out there was much more to astrology than they had imagined. Now, going outside that whole Department of Mental Health in the prison to the administration, I'm not sure we ever promoted it or talked about it much. As I said, we were kind of under the radar with the class, calling it Enhancing Self-Awareness. In my proposal, of course, I had to mention the astrology, but certain eyes, I guess, never read that proposal. And so, consequently, as long as we kept it under the radar and not too much of a thing, no one ever, at least, objected to it to my face.
Right.
So, as I said, and that was the, although I was in prison there for 30 years, I taught that astrology class for 20 years, and that was the longest-running class that mental health offered throughout my tenure there in the prison.
How many students would you have in a class?
Anywhere, you certainly get some attrition, because some guys would find out that, wow, this is not what I thought it was. So I might start out with 20, and that might attrition down to 12, or I might start out with 15, and that might attrition down to 8. But usually, I don't think I've ever had, after about a month, it was usually 15 to 25 once a week, 90-minute classes. And then I'd start over again after that with different students. But I was going to say, I don't think after about a month that anybody had any illusions about what they were going to be learning. And if they had I'll say the guts to stick it out, because it was intellectually challenging, because the average grade level achieved by inmates in the prison that I worked in was about 8th grade.
Oh, my gosh.
Now, I did work with some professionals who found themselves in prison, physicians, accountants, chemistry professors, things like that. But generally speaking, it's a poorly educated group of people. And but as I think you've probably met people in your own life, just because they may not be educated doesn't mean they're not smart.
Yes,
so consequently, I had always a nice crop of students, for the most part. Those who were not such whippersnappers would drop out of the class and figure out they couldn't do what was required of them.
Why are there so many different types of astrology if the astrology is based on a set number of variables, being stars and planets? Right.
And I would even argue that stars have nothing to do with it.
Really?
But that's a different story. But to answer your question, why are there all astrologers indeed will be using the same symbol sets, those houses that I mentioned, the signs, the planets, etc. But it has such wide applicability. I mean, there are people who use it in the financial world, business astrology. In fact, those are the ones who are most successful in terms of financial success, because they're on retainer from corporations and various other kinds of businesses. They work on the stock market, etc. Now, I don't know anything. I know very little. I know enough about financial astrology to say that I know very little about it, and so consequently, I don't practice that. But as I said, those are the ones who apply it to the financial world. There are people who apply it to something called electional astrology, where you go to an astrologer to try and determine what future date would be good to do something like get married or initiate a business or start any new endeavor. And there are also people who do something called horary astrology, which has specifically to do with answering specific questions like I don't know. Well, these are the kinds of people that get involved with occasionally police departments.
Right.
And trying to help solve a murder or a case. And the police or a representative of the police will come to that astrologer and say, what can you tell me about this particular crime? And they will collect certain information about that crime in terms of what we would call birth data,
right.
When it occurred, where it occurred, etc. And from there, they would construct a chart and look for some kinds of answers regarding that.
That makes sense.
So to get back to your question, why are there so many different kinds? It's because it has such wide applicability, and everybody, for the most part, is using that same symbol set. As I said, some people are using stars, and that's called the sidereal zodiac, and that has to do with the constellations. When you look up in the sky and you see the constellation of something, and there are astrologers who use that sidereal astrology, but they are in the minority. The by far majority of astrologers, at least in Canada and the States, use something called the tropical zodiac, which is the zodiac of signs, and it's determined by the equinoxes and the solstices that we all experience throughout the year. You still have the same signs, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, etc.,
right.
all the way through Pisces. Whether you're talking the sidereal zodiac or the tropical zodiac, but they are actually, due to an astronomical phenomenon called the precession of the equinoxes, Aries is no longer where Aries is supposed to be in the sidereal zodiac in terms of the time of our year. So, whatever your sun sign may be, the tropical zodiac, and most people, when they say what's your sign, they're talking about the tropical zodiac. If you were looking at it from the perspective of sidereal zodiac, it would be one sign back because of this planetary wobble that we experience on Earth. But nonetheless, it can obviously get very complicated.
Sure can.
A lot of different factors are involved. But because it has such rich meaning, layers and layers of meaning. I mean, if I say sun in Leo, that doesn't automatically mean that person is going to reflect a particular meaning about Leo, but there'll be something about Leo that will be reflected in them. So because of its rich depth and its wide applicability, you find so many different kinds of astrology.
When there are new astronomical bodies found, for example, in the case of Mercury and the different moons and Pluto and its moons, does this affect modern-day astrology, or everything is set?
It does. It does. Now, I'm, in some sense, a traditionalist, that I just use what the solar system planets that pretty much all of us grew up
right.
on, Mercury through Pluto. But we've had discoveries of other bodies, as you said, like Chiron in 1977, which is kind of a planetoid, and then most recently Eris and some other dwarf planets that are out there a little beyond Pluto.
Right.
And yes, and what happens is that astrologers will study what is going on in the world, what is going on in the culture at the time that this was discovered. And then they will try to keep track of associating a particular set of meanings with that new body. For instance, in 1930, when Pluto was discovered, we also had the beginnings of the atomic age. And Pluto has something to do with the atomic age, with very small and intense packets of power, if you will. So new bodies are incorporated by some astrologers. As I said, I have enough trouble just handling 10 planets. I don't need to add more, but there's even a faction of astrologers that have totally imaginary planets called trans-Neptunians that were developed, I think, back in the 30s or 40s. And they use those. I'm not quite sure how they do that, but they are non-existent bodies. But they give them value, and
right.
they use them in the chart. Once again, I wouldn't want to speak too much on those because I'm ignorant of that whole thing. It just never interested me, as I said, because I've got my hands full with
sure.
the ones we learned in school.
Brad, stand by. You and I have to take a commercial break at the bottom of the hour. Exonation, Brad Kochunas is our special guest. www.astrocare.net. That's www.astrocare.net. He's also the author of The Astrological Imagination, and it's available at Amazon. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and Brad and I will be back on the other side of this short commercial set as we continue here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, live and around the world on the Starcom Radio Network and the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Don't go away. Good real estate websites are not just about showing listings, but offering visitors valuable information about neighborhoods, market statistics, tips, and personal insights. Luckily, you will find that on Roost, but you won't on many other real estate websites in Budapest. That's why we created Roost. Roost is a website with tailored results for the foreign investor, curated by Hungarian-loving expats who found their home abroad and decided to roost in Budapest. Let Roost help you get started on the right foot. Whether you intend to live, work, play, retire, or simply invest abroad, Roost offers all types of properties in Budapest, from affordable studios to luxury homes. From neighborhood insights like where to grab a great coffee or how to buy property, our team of local experts can answer your questions and speak to the direct concerns of a foreign investor. Buying foreign property is an exciting and complex adventure. It can also be very time-consuming and costly if you don't have the best information and resources at hand. Roost provides professional real estate services and assistance to an international clientele of foreign property investors and rental apartment owners in Budapest. For more information on Roost, visit their website at www.roost.co. That's www.rooste.co. If you enjoy reading a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love From Out of the Woodwork by William S. Peckham. Sean Kennedy, a Toronto contractor, buys derelict houses, guts them, and turns them into multi-family dwellings. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, a century house in ruins, and starts the renovation, the house fights back. He is visited by ghosts of owners past. His visions are triggered by touching an oak mantle, reading a faded letter, opening an old locket, or opening a brand new casket in the basement. These visions will take you on a trip across southern Ontario from Niagara Falls to Toronto to Kingston. From Out of the Woodwork is now available in paperback and on your favorite electronic reader. To order your copy of From Out of the Woodwork, go to www.williamspeckham.com. That's www.williamspeckham.com. One Florida drug dealer made a serious mistake when he dared peddle his poisons on the schoolyard of Robert W. Morgan's preteen daughter. Morgan, a budding film director, tracked him to his hidden Everglades lair where his meth lab mysteriously blew sky high. When Morgan's demands to police to make grammar school playgrounds safer from drugs were ignored, he sought the counsel of CIA operative Frank Sturgis. Again, he was warned to give up what was becoming an obsession. Instead, Robert used his reputation as a filmmaker to infiltrate the mafia by stroking their egos and offering to make films for them offshore so they could import them as foreign product without paying taxes. When they agreed to build him a studio in Panama, Robert called the DEA and FBI and offered to work undercover. In time, their combined efforts revealed how the mob was secretly laundering billions of dollars through the Vatican Bank in Rome before returning to the States as foreign investments. Now read Morgan's story, Citizen Spy, Vatican Cover-Up, the Mob, Money Laundering, and Murder, available at Amazon.com, BN.com, and Borders.com. Call him Reef. Reef is your host. Reef is your guide. Are you happy? Happiness is like trying to find water in the desert. Can you find any? Sometimes, sure, but only a few drops. God is an ocean of joy. But God is not cheap. You cannot find God in a chemical. You must attract God's attention. How? Not by living to please your senses. That is false ego. The Matrix is not real. It is a computer-enhanced hallucination. You are spirit soul, not the body. We have forgotten how splendid our home really is, the spiritual sky. For more information, visit RishasSongOfBlue.com. That's www.REESHASSONGOFBLUE.com. Ever wondered if your advertising dollar is really working for you? If your ad would have been here, you and more than 4 million people would be listening to it right now. Contact ads at xzoneradiotv.com.
My name is Michael Telstar, Canada's leading mentalist from Toronto, Ontario.
Hi, my name is Splenda, and you're listening to my dad, Ron McConnell, on the X-Zone.
This is Psychic Dorothy from St. Catharines, and you're listening to Rob McConnell.
Hello, my name is Holly Reeves, an astrologer from Astro For You, and you're listening to Canada's #1 paranormal radio show, The X Zone, with Rob McConnell.
Welcome to The X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back, everyone. Brad Kochunas is our special guest. His website is astrocare.net, and Brad is also the author of The Astrological Imagination. It's available at Amazon.com. Brad, have you seen a change in the demographics of the people who are coming to you as an astrologer?
In terms of people I've seen changing it, no, generally I would say, and that worries a lot of astrologers, including myself, that we may be losing a younger generation. But typically women are much more interested in astrology than men. Middle-aged women are much more interested in astrology than younger women. Issues around why are they coming probably has a lot more to do with trying to confirm for themselves their own thoughts about themselves. I mean, so you have your own sense of identity and how you think you are and how you want your life to be, etc. And if you have an astrologer who's talking with you and confirming that for you, it gives you a nice sense of comfort. So my concern is that the demographic pretty much has always been the people that I've described, and I'm a little concerned that the younger generation may not be as interested in it as we were stemming from our youth in the 60s and 70s.
I remember reading Sidney Omar's horoscopes in the Montreal Gazette each and every day. And I found it always so amazing that this man could be using the stars to put down what people with birth dates in different houses would actually go through. How do like, is this just a general chart reading when people like yourself or Sidney Omar or other astrologers would say, all right, for Taurus today, Tuesday, August the 18th, 2014, bang, and then it goes into the reading?
Well, I think a certain percentage of the audience will find those kinds of sun sign columns relevant and resonate with what's being said. But I'm going to guess, and this is speculation on my part, that the majority of people in that particular sign don't find what it has to say accurate or useful. Sun sign columns are kind of like saying, well, all Canadians will have this kind of day,
right?
Or all Italians will have this kind of day. I mean, it's a group designation.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, people like to say there's some truth in stereotypes, and perhaps there are, or else the stereotype wouldn't have developed around ethnic groups, etc. But I think the same holds true for astrology. There's some truth to the stereotypes about Leo wanting to be in the spotlight, about Taurus being stubborn, about Geminis being curious. I think we can say that in a broad sense, but when you're looking at an individual, you're talking about the chart, which has more than that one sun sign factor, of course. It has many factors. And that's when you start to weave together, as an astrologer, you start to weave together an hypothesis about how this person might be as an individual. And of course, when you dialogue with the person, then you start to see the chart come alive, because the person is essentially, when they're talking to you, expressing their chart as an individual. So in reality, even though Omar garnered a lot of respect and certainly one of the better sun sign columnists, and was more than just that. I mean, he was a good astrologer with individuals. He was talented enough that perhaps he knew how to write in such a way that more than just a small percentage felt that what he was saying was accurate. Generally, I stay away from sun sign columns. I have acquaintances who write them, and I'm not sure it helps astrology's cause or it hinders it. There's controversy both ways among astrologers as to whether it's a good thing to do. I don't believe it's a good thing to do, but that's just an opinion on my part.
Has there ever been a time when you've sat down and done a chart for someone that it's just blown you away?
I would say every time
really?
I do a chart for someone, it blows me away. That's part of the fascination for astrology, of astrology for me, is that how in the world do these connections exist?
Yeah, exactly.
Am I just making this stuff up? Well, of course, I'm not just making it up. I'm using guidelines as to what planets mean, what houses mean, what signs mean. And then when the person says something and it just, boing, I go, wow. Boy, there's that part of the chart coming alive. As I said earlier, I'm kind of a show-me person. The chart blows me away each time I talk to a person about their chart, because they just so perfectly reflect it. And I just go, wow. So it gives me a sense that there's a phrase I've used a few times in that, when we all have our dark nights and we all have our crises. And I like to say that even though our lives may feel out of our control, there are larger guiding factors at play in the world. And so everything is not as chaotic as it seems for us, I believe, and that there is meaning to be drawn from crisis and hard times. And to help you construct that meaning, you have astrology to do that.
Who wrote the guidelines that you were talking about? And where did they get that wisdom from?
Well, I would say those guidelines have developed over millennia. I mean, we're talking about a discipline that's a few thousand years old. Western astrology, the kind we use in the States and Canada, derives originally from Babylonia, Mesopotamia, and then throughout history, it's different cultures. Every major culture of which I'm aware has had some form of astrology. But the Babylonians is where R originally derives from, and then it goes through, of course, Greek culture and Arabic culture and Roman culture and the European culture to America in the colonies. And so it develops. I mean, the meanings are similar in many ways, and in fact, there's a resurgence of medieval astrology going on right now in the astrological world, because finally there are people who are capable of not only being both astrologers, but are able to translate Latin, Greek, Hebrew, whatever text they might have, which were never paid attention to for many years. But in any case, you have a discipline that develops over time in the same way that medicine has developed over time. We don't generally practice medicine the way it was practiced in the 19th century, but there may be a few things that are still there. But we've changed our understanding of human health, and we've also changed our understanding of astrology over the years. So there's no single person who has demarcated themselves as, this is the guy we all follow. I mean, all astrologers have a history of astrology behind them, and certainly like particular authors and such. Everybody, well, astrologers, I mean, are familiar with a guy named Dane Rudyard, who was kind of a polymath in some sense. He was a composer and an artist and an astrologer and a philosopher and etc. But in the 1930s, he wrote a book called The Astrology of Personality, where he tried to make connections between what was popular then in terms of Jungian psychology and astrology. And he was quite successful at doing that, to the degree that in the 1960s, when he was still alive, he formed something called it might have been called the Congress for Humanistic Astrology, I'm not sure, but he was savvy enough to kind of align himself with the development of psychology in the last half of the 20th century, as we went from Freudian thought to behaviorism to humanistic psychology, and then to transpersonal psychology. And he was taking astrology along as an astrologer, and moving from Jungian psychology into humanistic psychology, humanistic astrology, and transpersonal astrology. So he's one that many people have a high regard for, although his writing is extremely dense.
Tell me about your book, speaking about writing, The Astrological Imagination.
Oh, well, The Astrological Imagination is a book that I published in 2008. I might just add, I just finished a manuscript for another book, but that's yet to be determined when it'll come out. And in any case, part of it was all previously published articles in various locations that people had asked me, because I speak around the country throughout the year at various astrological affairs. People would ask me, gee, that sounds great, or I read this article here, have you written anything else? So back in 2008, I gathered together a lot of previously published work and put it all in one location for people. So it's been very well received as far as I'm concerned, but of course it's never a bestseller, as astrology is such a small niche in the publishing world. In fact, the trend now is self-publishing, print-on-demand through various print-on-demand publishers. Even Amazon has their own print-on-demand. Mine happens to be done by a firm called iUniverse. But because it is such a small market, publishers, I think the publishing world is certainly diminished in how much hard paper they're putting out these days.
Big time.
So not signing up a lot of new authors. So many astrologers now are just using self-publishing to get their word out there. And if somebody thinks it's really good and they want to promote it in ways that might attract a larger publisher, some astrologers do that. But there are a few publishers that are still printing a lot of astrology stuff, like Llewellyn Publishing and Inner Traditions, things like that.
Where do you see astrology in the future?
Well, I'm somewhat of a pessimist in that I would certainly hope that it would become more popular as a adjunct for counseling, and more popular in terms of the financial world because, as I said, there's some very successful financial astrologers. But there are many astrologers who think it's going to be, replace psychology and psychotherapy. Well, I don't believe that to be the case, but I do believe that it does have a further role to play in the mental health industry. But overcoming the inertia and the current paradigms under which we live, I don't suspect within my lifetime it'll become much more popular.
What was the hardest part for you as being an independent or self-publishing author using iUniverse? Any tips out there for would-be authors?
Do your homework. Find a publisher. I mean, you can look online for print-on-demand publishers. You can buy books on how to print your own work, and by that I mean finding ratings and reviews of these various publishers. It can be a long and arduous process. You end up having to do a lot of it yourself, and don't hesitate to pay for an editor, not associated with these print-on-demand places. They're reasonably priced in terms of book publishing, but, you have to do I submitted the artwork that they did a wonderful job on, and of course, they, in terms of formatting the book, etc., they did a wonderful job. And promoting it is all up to the independent author. I did my book primarily as a something to go along with my lectures and presentations at various conferences where I would sell them. I had no dreams about, hey, this is going to be on every bookshelf in every bookstore in America. So just having it available through online booksellers like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, whoever, I'm not even sure, I'm kind of an Amazon freak myself, but there are a lot of online booksellers out there that can access the book because it's widely available. And as I said, anybody who's thinking of doing that really needs to do their homework in terms of finding not only a reputable, but a publisher who will turn out a book that is a good product.
Yeah.
I mean, I found iUniverse because there was another book called The Astrology of Film, and I read it and go, wow, this is well done. And then I saw that it was iUniverse, so when I was getting around to contemplating doing that, because I had my manuscript under with a publisher for about a year, and they kept expressing interest. But then after a year of holding it, and I wasn't allowed to submit elsewhere, after a year of holding it, they said, well, we've decided not to do it because we're kind of downsizing our amount of things we publish. So that was kind of a year that it just sat in limbo. So I said, I'm going to go the self-publishing route, which is what I did, and have been very pleased with it. And we'll do it again with the second one, I'm not sure.
When it comes to the availability of astrological software and people doing their own astrology charts, how do you see that?
That is, there's a wonderful market for that because there's quality software out there. And if you're not, if you're just interested in kind of being a dilettante with astrology, you can go online and there are places who will just do your chart for free. Just not an interpretation, but print out the chart itself if you're wanting to study astrology. They're all over the Internet. So the Internet has been quite a boon to astrologers. Not only that, but in terms of constructing a natal chart. I used to have to know a lot of math, and I was not a math whiz. I did decent, but that's not one of my favorite topics. So whenever I did a chart back before 1980, it took me anywhere from 15 minutes to a half an hour to do all the math and to get it done and hand-drawn, et cetera, et cetera. And as you might suspect now, I just enter birth data and press a button, and then I've got the chart. So in terms of doing that, there's great software out there. Some of it is, I don't know if they still use the term shareware or not, but you can get free stuff. There's apps on your phone that you can get for like $4. I picked one up that's a very decent app for constructing a natal chart, and accurately also, I might add. So, there will continue to be a market in that, and I would certainly encourage anybody who wants to start. I mean, training programs are still wanting their students to do it by hand, at least to learn it.
Mm-hmm.
They never have to do it again. But I'm have mixed feelings about that. I can understand reasons for doing it because it helps give you an understanding of what you're doing and what you're looking at when you're looking at a chart in terms of the astronomical features of it. But, boy, it's so much more easier to just hit a button and have it come out. As I said, I have mixed feelings about it, and it's still controversial in the astrology world.
In your opinion, what other modalities could be incorporated with astrology? For example, you use astrology with counseling or counseling with astrology. What other uses do you see that a person could actually combine their chosen profession with astrology?
Right, and I'm glad you mentioned that, chosen profession, because, if you want to be a psychological astrologer, it helps to have some training in psychology and counseling.
Right.
If you want to be a financial astrologer, it helps to have some training in marketing and finance, and et cetera. If you want to be a medical astrologer, it helps to have some medical training, being a nurse or a physician.
Mm-hmm.
So there are people who use it meteorologically, and that's still, although that's one of the oldest uses of astrology, meteorological, predicting the weather, etc. Once again, that's really not a lot has been done with that. So in terms of other new fields, I mean, as I said, it does have a wide applicability, and people use it for sporting events. There's a lot of people making money off of providing winners of teams. I'm assuming they're not all that accurate, but horse races and such like that, I have friends who do that kind of stuff and may not gamble with it, but will pick a horse beforehand, and darn if it didn't come up.
Wow.
Other people use that for like basketball games and football games and such. Once again, I have little interest and less talent in applying it to sports, but people do that. And, that's the nice thing about astrology is it has this wide applicability. So if you have training or whatever in your own profession and you want to say to yourself, gee, I wonder if astrology would be of any use in this particular line of career, go for it. Probably somebody's already doing it.
Didn't President Reagan use an astrologer?
He did. Both he and Nancy were very much fans of astrology. Of course, they kind of tried to keep that under the radar quite a bit. But I think Donald Regan, one of his staff, kind of let the cat out of the bag one time with something he wrote. And then the astrologer who was his astrologer, I can't think of her name.
Jean Dixon.
I think Sidney Omar did help him originally, but there was a woman. And
Jean Dixon.
A book called, no, it wasn't her.
No?
What does somebody say? The woman's first name. What does somebody say? Dolores, or what does Dolores say, or what does Mary say? I can't think of the woman's first name, but she was the Reagan's astrologer by all accounts.
Well, Brad, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. We've just run out of time. I wish you continued success, and let our listeners know how they can find out more about you.
As you've said a few times, you can contact me through my website, astrocare.net, or just visit a bookstore or Amazon and pick up my book.